Co- Can you guys hear me? If you can hear me, let me know in the chat. Okay, please, if you can hear me, let me know in the chat. The stream will start in a minute. Hello? Can anyone hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Okay, let's start. Okay, sorry about that. I went to go get coffee for myself. Okay, so welcome to the stream, guys. And in the live stream, we'll be creating a Node.js application, right? It's be an API from the scratch. If you can't hear me, let me know. Okay, so that I can know how to adjust my mic. And if the music is too loud, let me know as well. All right, so um, let me get into it. I have a note here that I'm gonna use. Sorry, my camera seems to be acting up, so I won't be able to show my face. But hopefully, we get that fixed before we finish the stream. All right, so we will first set up the project, and I will be using Determiner most of the time, and I use NeoVim for my code editor, but you can use any other editor you want if you want to follow this live stream, no problem. And if you have any questions along the way, just let me know. I'll pen it down, then we'll look at it in the intermission. Right, so to get started, we'll need to create a project folder initialize the project, and get started. So right now I will just go into my coding directory. Can be in directory on your system. Okay. Oh, perfect. Thank you. So first we create a directory. That directory is where our project will live in, right? So let me just look for a random here, right? Let me just look for I'm not very good with names. So let me just go with livestream, right? With Node and yeah, Node and MongoDB, right? So that would be our directory, and you can just seed into it, right? So I'll be using pnpm. The reason I'm using pnpm is because it's a live stream and I can't be installing all projects all dependencies at once. And also pnpm uses shared modules, right? So instead of me having to download a whole package from npm, what pnpm will do is it will pick some of those dependencies that package depends on. As long as I have them on my system, it will pick those ones and use them rather than downloading the whole dependency, right? So it helps for when you have maybe low data or when you have low storage on your device. But so the first thing we'll do is we initialize the package, right? Okay, perfect. So using the npm init, right? And we'll not use the white flag this time around because the white flag means we just want to answer yes to everything. But for this live stream, I will not use the white flag. I will go through each and every of those things together, right? But before I continue, let me ask, can you see the screen? So if you can see the screen, we should be good to continue. So I will use the npm init now, and it should, I don't know why it's not showing me. Okay. So right now it's asking for the package name. Package name is livestream with Node, right? Then the version is 1.0. Description, I'll just use something I have before, right? So I'll use this, creating an API with NodeJS and MongoDB using Fastify. That will be the description. Now, why do we do all of this? All this is just to make your package much more explainable to someone else that is trying to manage your project. So for the entry point, we leave it as default. Test command, we won't do that yet. For the Git repository, we don't have that yet as well because we have not initialized Git for this project. So we leave it that way. Keywords, we don't need all of that. Author, you can put your name or any other thing that you want. So for here, I'll just put terrorist. Really, it doesn't, all of this doesn't really matter because it only matters when you want to publish this package to npm, right? So that the package will be linked back to you as the owner, right? So the license, we leave it as ISC. So it's going to ask us, is this everything? And we're going to say yes. So you notice that my terminal has changed from just showing me my AWS region to actually a bit of more. Right, so here is the package. Let me bring it up. So right here it shows that okay, this is a package, right? This is an npm package. The version is 1, right? And we are using Node version 7.3.1, 17 rather, 0.3.1. But that's about what we need to know for now. If we list the directory, if we list all the folders in the directory and the files, it only has the package.json. Guys, if I'm going too fast, let me know so that I can move a bit slower, right? Sorry, I don't want to waste too much of our time, right? So now that we have that set up, the first thing we need to do is install some of the packages that we need, right? But for now, for just this moment, we only install so right now use pnpm install, right? So I'll only install Fastify for now. Fastify, not just only Fastify rather. I'll install Fastify course. So this is for front end really, but since we are not Fastify, then bcrypt for encrypting password, right? Then we use the JSON web token package. Now this will be for signing a JWT when the user logs in and all of that. So yeah, okay, and Mongoose rather. So installing Mongoose. So Mongoose is like a wrapper for MongoDB. So we don't want to write our own MongoDB queries, right? So we just want to use the Mongoose functions that are available. So this is just about the things that we need for now. Okay, sorry, let me, okay, no, we're not install this. So these are things we just need for now. And maybe .env. This .env, I will explain it in just a minute. So while this is installing, what .env does is it automatically picks your environment file. In most cases, it might be your .em file. That's what I call it That's why the package name is also .env. Might just be like a .m file, that like .enf file. And you can also decide to put the name and the location of your environment file inside the when you want to set it up. But sorry, my stem is a bit slow, right? It's not used to that. So you see the advantage of PNPM, right? So it's looking at number of packages that are needed. It is using 136. 136 meaning I have 136 packages available on the system, so I don't have to reinstall them. So the only thing it did was just install 5 packages, and that's about it, right? So now that we have that set up, we can go into coding. So let me open my editor. Now I am using, like I said before, NeoVim, but any other editor will work. The only idea is let your code work. That's what matters. So right here on, if it's small, let me know. Hope it's not too small, right? If it's small, let me know so that you won't have to squint your eyes to see it. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create a bit of basic project structure, just a little bit of it, not too much. So for that, if you look down at the bottom here, so here is where I can create my files and folders and all of that. If you're using Visual Studio Code, right, you would have to probably right click and all of that. But this is NeoVim. You are mostly advised to just use your keyboard most of the time. So let me stop rambling here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll create an app directory, right? The app directory is contains all our logic, all our business logic, everything we'll ever need for the project. Then outside of it, I'll create a server.js file. What server.js file will do is to run our project separately. Now, why don't I run everything in one file? I'm leaving this space here just in case you need to write tests later, because the idea of writing your code is to make sure that your code can be worked on later, your code can be built on later, right? So now inside our app directory, we create an app.js file. This app.js will contain our file initialization, database connection, you want to add routes, everything that will make your project get ready to be used, right? So the next thing I will need to do is create a couple of folders that I'll be using, right? So for this live stream, I figure we can just create a blog API. Now I know you might be like, yeah, we've written too much of blog APIs. What I want to go through in this live stream with you is a way that we can make use of most of what most companies need right now, and not just CRUD methods. We are going to try, if time permits us, we're going to try to do a station where you can follow an author, or follow an author, you can like a post, you can comment. Basically, the more you work on projects, the more you work on it, the more you realize that most of what you'll be doing will be CRUD. It just determines on how well you are doing those CRUDs, right? So to do that, let me create a post folder, and I also create a user. Now users, yeah, let's just name it users folder, and yeah, okay, let's also create one more. Now you are not bound, you are not forced to create this folders this way. Heck, you can even put all your projects in one file, but when it comes to manageability, or when it comes to scalability, then you're going to start having issues, right? So it's better to just like split them into separate folders and files so that it's easier for you to make use of. So speaking of that, I forgot to install a couple of other things. Let me quickly do that now. So the first thing we need to install is NodeDemon. Now what NodeDemon will do is it will help us to run our project locally. The advantage of this over just running Node and the name of the file is that it watches your file, your project directory. It watches to make sure that, okay, did you make a change, did you save, did you do all of that? If you did that, then it automatically restarts your project. So no daemon, right? I think I got that right. So yeah, okay. So to install npm rather, you can either use, if you are on Mac OS, right? If you're on Mac OS, you can use the homebrew. But if you're not on Mac OS, you can use npm to install pnpm. Let's install. You can either do that, or you can also use. You can also download the zip file, like the compressed file, extract it to your directory, and make it available on your system path. So I think I'm having a bit of a network issue. Just a minute. Where is this thing? Okay, so we're good. We're good. So while that is installing, is there any other question that you want me to answer before we get into it? And I hope you're enjoying the stream. If you're, let me know. So to install pnpm, like I said earlier, you can use the npm install, right, and use the g flag, which is going to install it globally, then pnpm, right. And if you're using homebrew, right, you can use homebrew as well to install it. If you're on Linux, you can use homebrew. If you're on Mac, you can use homebrew. If you're on Windows, you may have to use your PowerShell to install it using npm. Now, after installing it using npm, if your npm is available in your system's path, then it should be good to go. Anyways, if you're having issues with it, just let me know in the comment, then we'll just go through it together. All right. So that being said, I also need to like do one more other thing, and that is to use ESLint in the project. Now the reason I want to use ESLint is so that it can help with my code structuring and with my code writing, right? Now you might first think, okay, ESLint is mainly used for TypeScript and all of that. No, you can also use it for your code. Now the advantage of this is it will help you write much more better code, because there are situations where you're going to have memory leak, right? And you want to make sure that you avoid memory leaks, right? So using the common JS, we just want to check for problems. We are not using any of this front end. Sorry, and our project is not using TypeScript. Also, our code is going to run on Node, not on browser. So we're choosing Node. And yeah, we just leave the format that you want your config file to be saved in. You can use any one, but just use JavaScript. I mean, why not? She's asking us that the config that you selected requires the following dependencies. Do you want to install it? We'll say no, right? The reason is because we want to install it with pnpm. If we try to install with npm now, that will take much time. So we just do pnpm install d. Now the reason why using the as a dev dependency is because it is not needed in production. We just need it to run locally, right? So we install it like this, and let's just wait a couple of minutes for it to quickly get installed. Okay, the screen is small. All right, sorry about that. Let me increase it. Yeah, so is it better now? Let me see. Let me check here what you mean. Okay, I think the screen is a bit bigger now. Yeah. So now that we have those installed, okay, that's what you mean. Let me see. Okay, I think it's bigger now. Yeah. So let's continue with the writing our code. Now that we have those installed, we can easily set up our projects and quickly get started. I promise you, it doesn't take this long to set up a project once you are very much okay with it, right? Let me move this one here. Most of the time, you would copy paste your old code just to work with it. Okay, so now that we have this, let's start creating our project. So the first thing you want to do is you want to import Fastify. We'll be using Fastify, not Express.js. But if you worked with Express.js before, you notice that there's not much difference. But the reason I'm using Fastify is because I found Fastify to be just a bit developer friendly, really, and it's actually quite fast compared to um, Express.js, really. So first we install Fastify. The next thing we want to do is abstract it into another another variable called app. Now the reason we are not using Fastify again is because Fastify itself is a function, right? It's a function that takes in some parameters, it takes in some options, but we don't need to put those options for now. We don't, in fact, we don't need them for this project. But I'm sorry about this disturbance. Yeah. Now the reason I put it into app this way so that we can reuse the app. We can reuse the app variable easily. Right. So the first thing we want to do is just check if our app is actually running. That's like the first thing you need to do with any application that you want to create, and that's just using this calling the app dot get. Right, if we do this way, we can easily call our endpoints just like this. So we can just do app dot get, and next we need to make it a callback, and those callback will accept the request and reply parameters. Now when they do that, you can now use the reply to send back a message that okay, this server is up and running. Right, that's about what you need to do with it. So to do that, we just call the reply. Right, now you could try to do it the express way, but there's also the Fastify way, which actually makes a bit sense. Right, the first thing you can do is you can decide, okay, this reply I want it to be of a certain code. I want to be of a certain status code, and status code can be 200, right? So if you leave it like this, if you send any response, Fastify will also send this 200 as the status code for that response that you sent. Like if that doesn't make sense, let me know so that I can rename it. Okay, let me type them here. The packages I used: Fastify, Bcrypt, JSON Web Token. So I think that's about the yeah, and NodeJS for dev dependency. And then okay, yeah, that's about does it. So what we want to return is just to let we just want to know if the server is up and running. That's about the only thing we want to do, and we just put in the message will be server is up and running. And that's about the only thing that we want to do. We don't want to do any other thing than this, right? But we are not done, because if we call this app.js, it's going to run. Sorry, excuse me. If we call this, it won't run because we are not starting the server yet. But to start the server, we need to first export this app out of this file, then import it in another file so that we can use it. And to do that, we'll call the module.export field, right? And we're just going to export the app. So what this will do is what this module does help us to do is it will select everything that we've declared here. Assume we declared other things, select everything, then export it out. Right, let me save that. So I'll open another file here, and the name of we'll call the server.js. This is where we're going to start our application. So to do that, we first import it, app, then we require it by calling the app folder and the app file itself, without the extension, of course. All right, now, so the first thing we need to do is, in fact, you can call it any name here, right, but we're just going to leave it as app here, right, just to keep the flow going. So just call the app.listen. Right, now, of course, we need a port, right? You can't just if you do it this way, it will automatically give it a port, but you want to make sure you're in charge of whatever port that you are calling, right? So for now, we just have to code it 3030, right? Then we also need a callback to know if the server is actually running, right? Shouldn't forget that that'll be error, right, and address. Now I'll show you what this address will do in just a minute, but first we need to check if there's an error, right? If there's an error, we want to console the error. Now, in other cases, if it's a production application, you probably want to set up some sort of notifier or notification that will let you know that there was an error with your application. You can set up like a Slack or notification, or a WhatsApp notification, anything like that, or an email self rather, or email that okay, this server is down, right? So for now, we just want to say just want to control of the error. That's about what we're going to do. And not just that, we want to now close down the application. We don't want the application to run if there's an error with starting it, because there's no point in running an application that is not actually starting, right? So if that is if there is an error, it will do that. Else, now we'll not be using that. We'll not be using that if else. This is because if we do it this way, it still doesn't change anything. This if block will run if there's an error. If there's no error, it won't run, right? You can safely ignore this linting errors, right? They are just my ES-lint acting up, right? Like I said before, it helps you guide against writing memory leaking code, right? So what we'll do here is we'll just say something like server is running, right? Console know, okay, this is where application is running on. So just a minute. Okay, this is about it for that, really. Let me disable this for this line. Yeah, so I've disabled ES-lint for that side. Then also here, I think we are good. Now we are still not done. Reason is because we've defined this, but for every node application you need a script to run it, right? We could decide to say, okay, we want to do something like just a minute, I did not save this. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we could say we want to run something like nodemon server.js, and it will work, right? But imagine if you are to add other things to the code, like for example, you want to say, okay, you want to define the environment, then you have to type this every time, right? So that's where the package.json script comes in, right? Now to do that, sorry, my stem is a bit slow, but promise it's not gonna get slow later. Now the first thing we need to do in the script is define our start script, right? But for this, we just want to use the def. Now you can use anything you want here, but using the def just with our nodemon, because that is what nodemon will run, right? If you try calling node app and app.js, right, it won't do anything. It's just, look, it should just go through the application, and that's about it. You can also use pnpm here if you want to go all the way. pm run dev, it will still work the same way. So once you do this, the server should start up, and we'll need to test that once the server is running. So it says this is a node more version. It says to restart anytime, enter rs, right? Then it's watching all the files and folders in this current directory. Not just that, it is watching all these extensions. So if you write anything in any of the files with these following extensions and you save them, it will reload immediately. But then it said it's starting on this server. Like I said, this is what that address comes in. So let's see if this actually works, right? Just a minute. So I'll be using Insomnia to make this test, right? So the first thing we do is we create a request, and that is check server health. So it's a get request, like we define app.js, and the only thing we want to do is just call 127.0.0.1 and the port. Don't forget the port. If you don't put the port, it won't run, right? So if you call this get, we should get server is up and running, which is the message that we defined, and the status code 200, which is okay. So we can see that our server is running as intended, right? So let's just stop it for now because we don't need it running every time, right? So next year we created these 3 folders, but the folders that we mostly be using models is the posts and users, right? The auth does not need a models because it does not need the model file, rather, because we will not be saving auth token, right? Just for now, we just want to save post. We want to create a user, all of the shenanigans that way. But before we do that, we need to make sure that our database connection is working as intended. Now you can put it in your app.js, right, and just set it up here to be sure it works, or you can have to require that folder here, that file here rather. But for this live stream, we'll just declare it here, right? So the first thing we need to do is import mongoose, and using the require. Now if you are using ESCs, then you have to use your import statement. Now this is just normal ES5, so we'll be using require and export. So to connect to MongoDB, we use the mongoose connect function. So what this will do is it will take the first parameter as the URL for the MongoDB connection. Since you are using local MongoDB, you have to be sure you have MongoDB installed first before you try this. If it's not installed, it won't run. And also, if you have like a MongoDB Atlas account, you can also do the same here as well. So to do our to connect it to locally, we just do MongoDB. MongoDB will be the standard 127.0.0.1. Now, like remember I said before, if you call this 127.0.0.1 on your system, it won't connect. It will tell you refused, because it belongs to your system. It's your system's local host. But you can run applications, and that's what MongoDB is currently running on. MongoDB is always running on 27017 ports. All MongoDB local connections do this. But if you are using a MongoDB Atlas account, it will not run on a port. It will run on a host, right? It will run like a full URL host, right? So then the next thing we need to add to this connect parameter is the database name, right? Now MongoDB, unlike every other relational database out there, does not require you to have created the database earlier. It will automatically recreate it here. So to do that, we'll just create a live stream. Now let's just create live stream DB, right? And not just that, it's a promise based function, and we need to do the full call to be sure that it's connected successfully. Now you can just use catch, right, to just catch if it has an error. But for me, I like to be sure that okay, it's connected successfully, right? So to do that, I'll just do console.info. Now you notice I've been using console.info and console.error, not console.log. They all do the same thing, right? But I just like to be a bit fancy with what I'm using, right? So I can just say database fully, right? And that's not about it with the then. What the then does is it checks, okay, is it, has it been resolved? Then the catch, or what the catch does, it makes sure that the error does not break any other underlying code that you have after it. So what we want to do for the catch is console.error it, right? You just want to say something like and there was an error, right, connecting to the database. Now, like I said earlier, you might want to also set up um some of the services you use, because when the server is in production, you don't like have to go to it every time to be sure that it's working. You might want to have like a notifier to notify you. Then we'll be using the string literal here and just console the error that we faced, right? So this is about just what we need to do to get the database connected. So we save it and let's check again if it's working, right? We want to use the npm run dev. See, it's easy to just run this npm run dev rather than typing the full nodemon server.js thingy. So let's see if it actually runs. If our database is able to connect, we get database connected successfully. If not, excuse me, if it's connecting to the database before we start creating models for the project. And to do that, you can either put it in a separate file. Let me just undo all of this so I can see the way I created everything. It's easier to just show you that way. So the first thing we did, no, sorry. So the first thing we did was import our mongoose package, which is mongoose package from npm. Then call the connect function. What connect function does is it takes the first parameter as URL of the database that you're trying to connect to. Like I said before, I said earlier, if you want to connect to the MongoDB Atlas, you can do the same. Then, but since we are using local for now, we just leave it this way. Then, like I said before, it's a promise-based function, so you need to call the full promise, make sure you resolve it, and catch any error that comes through, and that's what the call for us. Then the next is we want to catch if it has any error. If it has any error, then we want to console the error. And okay, yeah, one other thing that I did not add is we want to close the application, because since the application relies on a database connection, there's no point in us leaving it running if an application did not connect, right? So what this process of exit does is it exit this current Node.js process, right? It just exits, it just closes it, it quits it immediately, right? Yeah, I've changed it back, sorry. Then what I did was I tested it. Okay, so it runs this. It tells us if it's connected successfully. So easily it's connected successfully, right? Now the next thing we'll do is start creating models, right? So the auth folder does not need a model, because for this project we just want to go simple. But for the post, the post require a couple of model files, right? Yeah, it should not be stuck anymore. If it's still stuck, let me know. It should have we it should have updated itself. Okay, I guess it's no more stock. Okay, so we'll create the models folder. The models will contain some models that we'll be using later, right? So the first model we'll create is the post. Create the post model, and want to create the likes model, and also want to create comments.js model. Now all these files will be in JavaScript extension, because we will be using JavaScript really. Now, okay, I think I may have created it wrongly, and let me see how I can move it. Okay, let me create it again here, right? And next one will be like.js, and next one will be post.js, right? So I'll remove these ones here because I created them outside, which which I'm not supposed to do, right? So let me delete all of this. Yeah, okay. It shouldn't be stuck anymore, right? Okay, good. Okay, so to define some skill, the person give it any name you want, but just to be more verbose, just define it as a post schema. Then this schema that we'll be using is a class, so we'll be using the new schema class. Now we'll now define like an object, right? Like an object of schema types inside this new schema file, new schema class. So that's what it will use to create schema for the post model. Just a minute, I will explain it now. And we also need to export it because we'll be using it later, which you will see. Use the model. Now what this mongoose the model means is we are telling mongoose, okay, we want to create a model. It's going to ask us, okay, what's the name of the model? The name of the model is post, right? And what's the schema that we are trying to use to create the model? Now we could also add the collection. It's optional. The collection is what we defined earlier. Collections in MongoDB are databases in other DBs, right? But we don't need to define this because we already connected to it from the start, right? So to not waste much time, unlike other DBs, we don't have to explicitly define an ID. MongoDB will by default give us IDs, right? So the first thing we need to create though is title, right? Now want to make sure that our post has a title, and the title will be a type of string. We want to also make it required, so required to be true. So which means if we don't pass this title whenever we are trying to save this post, whenever we are trying to save a post, it won't work. So the next thing we need to create is body, right? You can just give it a title and body. You don't need to do too much. And type is string. We will factor this in just a minute. Before we leave here, I'll show you just of like schemas like we defined here. We've not defined any schema here, but you'll see in just a minute how how it will work, right? So put in the type. Now before we'll be using string, right? Now we're going to define another schema type, which is what Mongoose uses to link all schemas together, and that is schema.types, right? Dot object id, object id class. Now what this will do is whenever we are saving a like to a certain post, MongoDB will only pick the object id of that like and save it. It won't save the whole like value, the like data into this array to really save the object id. But then we now want to reference the like table or the like schema in this case, right? And that's not all. We also want to have comments, right? Comments that belong to this post, and the type it will be the same thing, schema.types dot object id, and the ref in this case will not be like, but it will be comment. We'll define this schemas in just a minute. Now we are not done. We also need to add one more. Now this is an external option, right, that MongoDB offers, and that is timestamp. Now what timestamp does is it will automatically create a created art and updated art, data for you. If you want to add it by yourself, you can, but I just find this easier to use with MongoDB. So we've defined this. Now the next thing we want to do is, now I don't mind my formatter, it's just acting up. So next we want to define the comments schema, right? So what I'll just do is I'll copy this, I'll copy paste this here. Since we are using it, we are going to be using it. Now same thing we did earlier. Const, this is the comment file, so comment schema equals new schema. Then now there's one thing I did not add here, but I'm going to add it in a minute, and that's the user that owns a comment, right? So I want to make sure, okay, that we know a user that assign every comment to a user that actually made that comment. Now in this case, and that is user, it will be of type schema.types.object.id, like I said earlier, and it's going to be referencing the user class. Next is the comments that the user made actually. Now, okay, yeah, which is going to be of type. Never mind. There's something I have to do before, but it won't be necessary, and we want to make it required. So you notice a trend here. It's just almost the same thing, but just different fields. And those are the fields that we actually will be using later. And that's just about it. Now the next we want to do is just put in timestamps here as well. So it's not by force that you should put timestamps in. Like I said before, they are optional, but just because you don't have to create, you have to start creating and updated that fields, and then have to work on making sure that they actually update as needed. Then, like before, we're going to export this as well and create a model. That's not capital and comment and video comment schema. Now that's just about what we need for this comment schema. So what I said we missed earlier, which is the user, I'll just copy it here and paste it here. I don't need to put this, yeah. So that's about it. Now we define the post schema and the comment schema. The next thing we need to define is the like schema. Now the like schema is almost the same thing as comment. In fact, probably we just, no, never mind, let's not copy. Post this paste this schema, new schema, and of course, like before, we want to add the user that liked the post, and which is also what I forgot here. The type, the post that the like was made on, right? Schema.types.object.id, and the ref will be the post. I need to also add this here. So while that is formatting, then of course module.export equals mongoose.model like, right, and like schema. Now why do we have this here? Why do I have it like this? Under post, like now I told you before that we have these likes and we have the comments, and they need to reference the model name that we actually defined, and that's why we define the model name as like here, and here we are making this reference like, right? So this comes in handy later when you want to start populating the database with your code, and you want to start populating your responses. Now we've done all of that. Let's move on to users. Sorry. So under users, we're going to create the models folder and create a file inside it as well, user.js. Now, like before, to import this, right? You notice just that pattern, the same pattern just keep repeating itself. It's the same pattern over and over. So the advantage there is you just continue doing it, right? So username type will be of type string. It will be required true. Now I will introduce one more field now, which is unique. Now what this unique means is it won't allow any other person create the same username again. So that's why in institutions when you want to create your account in some social media platforms, they're going to tell you, oh, this username already exists, right? Now all of this is when we try to use MongoDB validator, but we won't be using MongoDB validator here because of setting it up, but we just want to have it here so that in the case of when we decide to share our code, any other person can see it and be able to understand that okay, we are setting these things as unique and required. So the next thing we want to set is the email. Of course, it's of type string and it is required as well. It is also unique. Next is we're going to password will be string. Next is we're just going to set a first name, or we can just set name. Our application is not doing much. Now there's something I want to introduce to us here, and that is just straight up defining your schema type just like that. If we just put string here, right, MongoDB will read this as, oh okay, this name field is of type string. It's not required, it's not unique, it's not any other thing, just the way it is. Right, so the advantage of this is you can avoid typing type string, like you can avoid typing this. You can avoid typing this and just give it just one name, and that is the value of string, and that's about it. Username, email, password, name. Yeah, I think okay. So we are not done. Now, remember we defined this post, like, comments in one place. Now, we want to reference them here. We could say not to, but it has setting them here when it comes to populating it. So the first thing we want to do is the post. So we use something called a many to, or should I say one to many? Yeah, so one user to many posts. That's what we'll be using here, and that is type of schema dot types. Of course, we're going to use the object ID. Let's not forget our post for object ID, and it's going to reference the post model, right, that we defined earlier. Next is we want to keep track of our likes, right, and this likes will not just be to one thing, it will be to all posts that we've liked before. Right now, it will also be of type schema of object ID, and it's going to reference like now, and the last one is comment. The type will be schema dot types dot object ID ref comment. That was a bit much, but let me go through it with you once again. We declare the username. It's be of type string. It is required. It is unique. Then email as well, not unique, because we don't want a situation where so they will never be saved the same way. Right? We just want to avoid that unnecessary code block. Right? Name, which will be let me rename it to just full name. So full name is, I think full name is much more better. Right? It's going to just be the name of the user. Post, number of posts, likes, and comments. And don't forget, at the end of it, exporting it. Nice model. So it will be of type user schema. Remember, the way we declare this module here, the model here, user, we also referencing it as user here. Like I said before, if you define something different here and you're expecting the reference and you're expecting it to be referenced here, it won't work that way. Right. So let me move on to, now that we are done doing all of this basic setup of models, really. So let's quickly do one thing. Let's see if we can register and log in a user. And that's like the first thing that will make your app work. So the first thing we need to do is we'll create some files in the authentication, the auth folder. So let's create the controller.js. So that's the first file that we'll create. It will be in charge of our control. It will be like the controller for application. That's where our endpoints will hit first before any other place. Excuse me. Now the next thing we need to create is the service. Yes. Now, why service and controller? The idea is never let your controller know what your service is up to, which we'll see in just a minute. Now, our service will try as much as possible to avoid calling any. So let's go out of our way to get the users folder, the models, and user.js file. Now we've imported it. Is there any other thing we want to import? Yes, we want to import bcrypt. Want to import bcrypt. Yeah, let's just leave it like this. Our JSON web token will come later, right? So it's in situations like this that I like using classes, but let's not use classes here. Let's just use our normal exports, right? So the first thing we need to do is let's just create one. That is the first function we create is find by the user by using the email. I think I may have missed the process. I jumbled it up. So async, yeah. So yeah, this should do it. Now what we want to do is return follow me, await user dot find one. Now in Mongoose you can use this find one to Mongoose and MongoDB really. What this find one does is it picks the field that you're looking for and returns if it actually has the document you're looking for, it returns it. Find one email, and that's it. This is what we'll do here. We're just going to find a user using email. Now normally we should have done something like this. If the field that you're looking we just had electricity, so we can continue work. I was considering letting you guys know that I will have to end the stream soon, but we have light now. Hope the volume of this the fan is not affecting you. So like I said before, we don't have to put in the that email. We can just leave it like this and you still find it. So the next one we want to add is find by user ID. Now as it said, what it will do is it will find it by the user ID. Now I'll show you just how this will work. And this one we just want to return await user dot find by ID. User find by ID, user ID. Now what find by ID does is it only takes one parameter, and that is the ID that you're looking for, right? I think I got it right. Yeah. So if I should try and get it, hopefully it brings it out. So it finds a single document by its ID field. Parameter options there, just get the ID of any type, but that any type has to be an object ID type, which you'll see in just a minute. So not just that, we want to also call one more function, and that is the create function. Now what the create function will do is it will create the user and it's just taking data. Now this is where bcrypt comes in, right? What we want to do is just do data dot password If this was Java, if this was TypeScript, we would have declared the type, an interface and all of that. But JavaScript is loosely typed, so we can just go out of our way. So what we want to do is encrypt. So we encrypt our password before saving it. That's by calling bcrypt, right? Dot hash sync. Now we are not using hash only because we don't want to call await here. We just want to call the hash sync, so to just make it a synchronous function. The data that we are trying to hash and our hash sort, right? Most times you are advised to use, right, or a number. Okay. So after doing this, what we want to do is, of course, we just want to do this. Return await user dot create data. It's as easy as this, guys. We encrypt. So we encrypt the password, then we save it. We don't have to do more than this. I'll just add a comment here. Encrypt password. Now, why am I returning values here? Because I need them in the controller. I want to avoid as much as possible calling the models in the controller. Really, it's just a clean code thing. It's not like it's not a must and you must follow that method. So now we have this ready. Now let's start calling some things in our controller. First thing that we'll do is, of course, model.export, right? First thing we want to do is call the register. Now, I said before, if you are using Express.js, this will feel familiar with the request. This request can also be called request. In fact, you can call them anything that you want. You can put RW, doesn't matter. What we do is you pass the whole Fastify instance from the app straight here, right? I will show that in just a minute. If you're enjoying this stream, let me know. If I'm going too fast, definitely let me know so I can go a bit slower than this. And don't forget to also subscribe if you haven't. It's really helped me. Sorry, that's a bit of self promotion. So work with a register controller. We want to register the user. How do we do that? No, we said it earlier that we want to be sure that the username does not exist before, the email does not exist before. Which reminds me, we also need to call find by username here as well. Async username will be the parameter, and return await user dot find one. Now the advantage of using services, right, apart from just using controllers here, is you can actually do numerous things that you want here. You can let me show you an example of what you can do. That's kind of like a nifty thing. You can do is username exists, right? What this will do is, this is just me digressing a bit, but just give me a minute, guys. Now what this will do is to just return if username exists or not, which as I remember now is what we should have used before that. We just do the return, right? Await return user dot exist, and we call the email we need, and I'll show you just how let's do the first thing here. Now I like calling my controllers in try and catch. This is because I don't want to pass the whole error to the main app instance itself. I want to catch it here and just return whatever error that I experienced. So I just want to return where's the code. Remember I said it earlier that with earlier in the stream that if you call Fastify with where's the code first, it's going to use that code that you defined earlier and return whatever error it encountered, right? Now you can do this way. I also do this in another way, you see. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make checks. Check if email and username exist. That's what I want to do. Now, easier we can do is if since we are not using async here, we are not using await here, we can just absolutely remove it. So you see how that comes in handy just a minute. But before we do all of that, we need to first import the service by calling user.require and service. So you notice that we are not calling any model here. We're only calling the service. We are putting all the logic in the service inside the service file, right? So what we want to do is we want to check, right, if user service dot is username exists. And now this is not really advisable if you want to make it custom, right? Is email exists. Now what these guys will do is if any of them is true, all we just want to do is res.code 400 return a message saying username or email exists. Right. Okay. So we just want to check if username or email exists. If any of that does, just return this error, username or email exists. Then if they don't, we don't have to put the else. We can just leave it like this. If they don't exist, and we want to return a data object that contains the user that was created. And this is about what you need. If you want to send email, that's in here inside controller or inside service or inside another file, right? So you want to keep your controller as clean as possible, because when it comes to refactoring, you don't want to let your controller suffer too much, right? So let's test this first to see if it works. But to test it, we need to create one more file inside this auth folder called the route.js. Now what the route.js does is it will be a route file to contain all the routes that we need to use. Now to do that, let's first import a user controller, then controller, remember without the extension. You can put the extension, but it's not advisable you don't need it. Of course, module.export. Now this is where Fastify comes in with its shenanigans. Remember I told you that whenever we do this whenever we do our controller, we have app file all the way down to whatever controller that we are calling at that point in time. And to do that, we need to keep a way to do that is by calling the Fastify parameter here and an optional opt. Now why not just only Fastify? Is because Fastify will be expecting two parameters, and if it's only one, it might throw an error. We don't want a situation where it will throw an error and it won't throw an error. It's not really advisable, right? So the first thing we want to do is call the first endpoint, which is register. So we want to use a post request register, right? And then next we want to do is call the handler in charge, which is the controller in charge, user controller dot register, and that's about it for the route. Now begs the question, how do we oh sorry, I really need to remove this. Sorry, it was not supposed to be, so just like disturbing me now. Don't worry about it. What I want to do is, it's not that I just want to disable it for this line, right? That is just ESLint delisting. So the use in terms of express, that's where Fastify also does its things a bit differently. We'll call it here in the app file, right? But before we call it, we register them. They are like use in Express, almost everything, almost every of your functions in Fastify is seen as a plugin. This, for example, is a Fastify plugin. The only difference is our controller is not a plugin, right? Our controller is a normal controller file. Now, because we call this plugin Fastify, we have access to all all the functions, all the classes that Fastify uses, because we'll be registering it here in just a minute. We call the app.register. The app.register will now send in the whole app instance into our file here. I don't know if that makes sense. If it doesn't, let me know. So now to call the require function, want to require our, not outside, sorry, hot, and that prefix is what we'll call first before we can use our route. Don't call the prefix, it will know where to use the route, right? So once we've done this, let me close the editor. All things considered equal, it should run and we should be able to create a new user. Let's see, and starting node server .js. Database connected successfully, so it's connected database for this time around, and our server should connect in a minute. Oh, okay, so apparently there's an error. Plugin did not start in time, so might need to check what's going on. So let me check what's going on with that. Let me see route. So I've seen where the error is. I did not add an async. Now I said before that plugin based plugin. So we now adding an async here means it won't be able to add it to queues to start it with other parts of the application. So with this little change now, this should work. So oh, perfect. Now our server actually started correctly. Now to use it, let's go on to our test. We want to register a new user, right? Register. It's a post request. It's a we are using application that /json because we did not specify something else. So the first thing that we want to add is the username. Let's use John Doe. Then email john@doe.com, right? And password, let's just put super secret. And what other things that we need to put? I think that's about it that are required. Remember, we not put our full name as required. So once we've done that, let's also add the endpoint that we need to call. Now, all things considered, this should run and actually work. Okay, so seems we missed something there. It says username or email exists, which shouldn't be so, right? So let's go back to our code and see what we did wrong. So let's see, user controller. Oh no, auth controller rather. Okay, so must have done something wrong. Let's see what actually went wrong. So if user service username exists, if this exists, they don't exist, so it shouldn't actually give us that error. But I think I may have an idea of what is wrong. Now let's put an async here. Let's see what if it's gonna work this way. Right, if it doesn't, then you might just as we're just going to go ahead and use the um we're just going to go ahead and close this. So this is what we'll do. We'll just avoid the O using the exist, and instead we'll just go ahead and use our find by email and find by username. Right, so might be missing something there. Who knows? So let me just call this. I'll use the await function, and if user service dot find by find by email, wake dot body dot email, and find by username. And I think those are the two that we have. Wake dot body dot username. Those should be about. So I don't believe we are. Okay. Seems we are missing an error somewhere. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we need two of that. So the error is gone. And so remember I said earlier that we can use so what is it called that should work as intended. Okay, so as our server started, and let's test that one more time. Okay, I think my system must be really running low. Okay, so I guess I pressed it twice without knowing, so it kind of created it twice. Just a minute, let me just give it a much more different name here. So let's see how this works out. Perfect. So our database, our user is created. Right, I must have clicked it twice because my system was hanging, and it creates the username, creates the email, password is encrypted, and user ID that I said to create automatically, posts and likes and comments that we defined earlier. Right. So let's test if this same user. Oh. So let's see if the same user can log in. Right. Just a minute. So we just click the login function here as well. Login and async request try catch. Since we just be using the same thing, let me just copy paste it. just paste it here. Now while that is being pasted, we'll also be using this. So but for now we'll be checking if the user is available by username. We just want to use username and password to log the user in. So over, right? The earlier we're checking if we can find the user by the username. Here we're just going to flip it over. If you can't find it, then you can just say username is incorrect. Now that's not it, we are not done. Remember here when we're creating the user, we were encrypting the password. So, but since we don't want to put most stuff here, we don't want to put the user model in the controller, we have defined comparing our password in the service, and that is we can just put compare password. Right, that's about what we want to do, and we don't need to async it. We just want to check the no, we're going to async it. Sorry, we're going to check the user ID, right, and the password. Now, how do we do this? What we just do is const is you can just do is compared, right? Just something like this equals. In any case, what we could actually do this user password. Yeah, this is much more better. So you can just like compare the two, right? So you can just do is compare. If not, you can try to put it in your you can try to put it in your controller, but for now just leave it here, because later on you might want to work more on user compare password. Other things you might want to compare. Means that immediately we saved this service file, this the nodemon is telling us we're starting due to changes, so it will started immediately, right? So like I said earlier, that's what that works for. Now what we are doing here is after checking if the username exists, which brings me back to what I wanted to do earlier. Check if user exists. What I want to do here is I want to reuse the what I want to do now is I just want to check this. Now if no user, right, what I'm doing here is I just subtract it out to a number, to another variable. Now if no user, return this. That's what I'm doing. Now if there's user, do the next thing, compare password. That's what I want to do. Now how do I do that? Just want to do if, right, if await, considering our compare password is not using async, right, we can try to leave it, but let's just leave it like that for now. If user service dot compare password. Now I want to check two things: the user password I've got earlier and the body password. User dot password and direct the body dot password. Now what we want to do now is we'll flip it over. If after being comparing they don't amount, you can just res dot code as well, 400 return message, right, incorrect login details. Just make it a bit more obscure, but can just put incorrect password if that's what you want to use, right? Now if all of this is nullified, if we did not get return from all of this, we can now call our JWT, and for that let's import JWT, JSON web token. Oh my bad. So let's do that, and what we want to do is we want to sign the token. Now we'll be signing the token with the user ID, not the user email or the user username. We want to use the user ID. Doesn't matter whatever you use, you just want to make sure you use something that does not contain your sensitive user details, right? I'm using user ID here because It's just a string of numbers that cannot be easily identified with. Right, so what I'm just gonna do is const token. Let's put that. Const token equals jwt dot sign, right? And let me see if I can make this show what is actually needed that we need to use be seen. Because whenever it's being seen by malicious people, they can easily use it to decrypt whatever they want to decrypt and get access to your user details. All right. Hmm? Okay. Just a minute, guys. Okay. Um. So, guys, we'll have to stop at login. I need to really attend something, but I promise we'll continue from here next time, right? But for now, let's just finish our login. Finish our login, and we'll talk about other interesting things later. I really am sorry about this, right? So like before we did earlier, we set the code type and then we return the details we want to return. So just do user logged in successfully, and want to also return user details and the token. That's just about it for logging in. Authentication is not other than this really. That's just about the only thing you need to authenticate a user. You don't need more than this. Then when that comes to protecting your route, we'll get to that in another time. But for now, this is where we are going to stop. So sorry about that, and let me save this. So let me save this, then we'll test the login, make sure it works, then we'll continue from here in another video. I actually have a video coming up this week. I actually have a video already, sorry, um that talks about this, that does authentication. But I have another video coming up this week. It talks about the models, talks about the blogs and following and all of that. So let's come back to Insomnia. Let's test if our register actually works. So I'll just duplicate this request. So I'll remove the email. Oh yeah, I forgot this, but we are here to actually add it to the routes, and all of that. So let's just add it to the route. Sorry. Really have a register here, and if we try to call login, it won't work. So fastify.post login user controller dot login. So yeah, this should do it for our user and login. That has been done. Let it reload. Then once it's done reloading, let's now try logging in with the username and password that we just created and login. So this should work as intended. So it's saying login, correct login details. I think we are missing. So apparently we are missing the compare password part. So let's see what we are getting wrong. What are we missing? What are we missing? What are we missing? let's check what the compare sync does. It takes in the data, oh, and the encryption string. So we actually mistake was we flipped it over. So it's supposed to be the password that we are trying to check for, the password that we are bringing in, and the encrypted password. Oh, okay, my bad. I think I also did. I named it wrong. Password. Yeah, password. That should do it. And yeah, I think this should solve the whole issue. Oh, yes. The difficulty is actually available. Um, let me quickly answer this. So that has connected successfully. Oh, okay, yeah. Let me just try this now. And okay, so now we're able to log in successfully. It's returned the user details and a JWT token. Now these tokens will be using later in coming videos. If you are here till now, if I have not bored you up with, you know, all my unnecessary talks and all of that, if you really enjoyed the stream, do leave a like on the video and please subscribe, and you can also share it with others. I will